We purchased land in New Mexico in 2015. This YouTube channel is just sort of a chronicle of developing that into a home. The area of central New Mexico we picked put our property about an hour outside of Albuquerque and 90 minutes from Santa Fe. In 2015, I found the property on LandWatch after pricing the area for a while. We paid about $25,000 for 86 acres, which works out to just under $300 an acre. It's a good price, but not unheard of for the area. I've seen several properties for the similar pricing even 6 years later. Of the 4 properties we viewed, we selected this one primarily because it was down the mountain, whereas the other 3 were up the mountain. This meant that we would be closer to water, and we wouldn't have to drill through the mountaintop, either for power, for water, or to put in a foundation, which was a big bonus to us because we were planning to self-build rather than hiring a contractor. Though Bunny Butt Acres doesn't have the same views the mountaintop parcels offered, we still have beautiful views in almost every direction. Allow me to share some of them with you while I discuss details, and maybe you'll see why we've grown to love it just as much. After viewing the properties, we had the same conversations anyone would. Should we? Shouldn't we? Are we nuts? Are we really going to spend all this money on 86 acres of desert to build a house we have no idea how to build? What are we doing? We had planned about a week in the area to sort of look around to make sure it was somewhere we even wanted to live, so we had some idea what we were getting into. And it also gave us time to go talk to planning and zoning, as well as any other city offices that came to mind. So what we found out there were a few things. First, we were going to need well and septic installed before we could get any kind of permit to build a house. This was good to know, as we had kind of thought about maybe putting up a shack and just kind of roughing it. That wasn't an option. Later, we came to find out that this was mainly because we live in what I'll call Breaking Bad country. And because people tend to build Breaking Bad labs in Breaking Bad country, they have a small problem with fires. Basically, the land is so ridiculously cheap, people move out here, they purchase a small parcel, they build themselves a laboratory or kitchen, as some call them, and then they start cooking things, and then they start a fire, and then they have no fire prevention to put out the fire before it spreads, and next thing you know, there's a big problem in the middle of the desert. So for that reason, the area now requires that you have fire prevention, which is considered water at least. And if you have water, you need septic. So we have to get water and septic before we can build anything. That's okay. Them's the rules. We also inquired about things like self-built homes. What kind of things would we be able to get permitted versus what was off limits? Things like Adobe were in very early considerations. We thought, with enough time, we could build Adobe. After discussing things with both the planning office and an Adobe homemaker in the area, we decided that wasn't the method for us, just because of the building codes and requirements for that particular type of structure. Not because it couldn't be permitted or wouldn't be permitted. It was just the work to get it to code seemed like more work than building another type of house. And we just didn't feel comfortable that we could both do the work and get everything perfectly to requirements without hiring a contractor or consultants and whatnot. And the whole point was to try to keep the costs down as low as possible. At the time, we were also told that things like earthships weren't permitted in the county we were in, even though we knew for a fact, and they agreed that they were being built in the state, just not in the county that we were in. Since that time, we've heard but not confirmed that they're now permitted, as any structure already built in New Mexico is permitted in any other county in New Mexico. We haven't verified that, but it seems like a common, pretty logical law for them to have instated in the meantime. So at this point, we had kind of gathered all the information we really could in the area. We just spent the week traveling around, trying restaurants, visiting sites, seeing what was going on. And then we returned home and began to debate our decision. And this is when I went into research mode. So one of the first things I looked into was our realtor had said that there was an aquifer under the property. I wanted to verify that before we bought the property. If it turned out there wasn't any water under there, that changed our plans a lot. And, we might as well at least consider some of the mountain properties if we couldn't get water easily on the flat parcel. So once I confirmed that there was in fact an aquifer underneath us, one of the things that actually popped up in that search inadvertently and totally by happenstance was that the area was in a drawdown, and it was just a random result that popped up in a Google search. And so I did at least find out and become aware that the area is in a drawdown. They're losing about 2 feet of water per year. And it's just something that it was good to know so we could account for that. And it was also something that we talked to our well driller about, and we compensated by running our well a little bit deeper than it needed to be, in the hopes that we could at least get maybe 50 years of use, give or take, out of that well before it dried up, which I think is a pretty good amount of use for the cost of the well. Something else the realtor told us was that wells out there cost about $20 a foot. I think he told us $20 to $22, and that was 5 years before we had the well drilled. So by the time we had it done, it cost us about $25 a foot for the drilling. That doesn't count the pump house and the culvert and all that kind of stuff. And I'll go over the costs of everything later, but all totaled, that came to more like $14,000, which works out to about $52 a foot. So it's not that the realtor lied per se, but he did kind of skim off that additional cost of a culvert and pump house and all that extra stuff to make it sound like it would be cheaper to move to the area. Just something to keep in mind if you're shopping for land. So with the aquifer confirmed, my next bit of research was to verify the depth. He had mentioned that most wells in the area were about 150 to 200 feet, so I just wanted to verify that. While digging around, I found that New Mexico actually has not a really good, but they do have a resource for this. It's a well lookup. It's on the state engineering website, and it's the New Mexico Water Rights Reporting System. And after a lot of work and a lot of digging and a lot of teaching myself a lot of things I'll probably never use again, I found out that most of the wells neighboring our property-ish. It's a very odd lookup system, and it's not easy to maneuver through, but you can do it. And once I did, found out that most of the wells around us were 125 to 200 feet. And the final thing I did, because I stumbled across another resource, was New Mexico has a GIS mapping system called Sidwell's Portico. And I would go on Sidwell's Portico and pull up the neighbors. And that allowed me to see that we had state land on the north, and another edge was bordered with a dairy farm, and another side was another dairy farm. So we had some idea what our neighbors were going to be like and who had the right to sell the land and who it might be sold to and whatnot. Basically, what's private, what's state, etc. The next issue I had with our particular realtor was that when we did finally make our decision, which I'll get to later, one of the things I asked for was a survey. And he insisted we didn't need one because the land had a fence line on 3 sides and a road on the 4th. And I said, that doesn't matter. I don't know who put in the fence line. I don't know what guide they used to put it in. For all I know, it's way off base. He argued and argued. It was going to be about $1,000 for the survey. I wanted the seller to pay. They were insisting either no survey or we pay for it. And eventually it got to the point where, between the price being so good and just not really knowing what we were doing and getting ourselves into, I was starting to kind of back off on the sale a little bit. And it was just enough that I started to say, maybe we just won't do this and we'll wait and learn more about the process before we pull the trigger. And I think me getting gun shy caused the seller to really say, am I gonna risk the whole sale over $1,000? And they finally caved and got the survey. Turns out that was a very good thing to do because the fence is off by 65 feet on one side and almost 85 feet on the other side. That is a significant amount of our property to be off by. And on one side, it's in too far, and on the other side, it's out too far. So it still works out to be about the same amount of land, but the fence is most certainly in the wrong spot. And right now, there's nobody around us who cares. But, in 20 years, somebody might want to try to build something or, press us to put up a fence, or they might want to put up a fence on their end of the property. And having that survey is proof that the fence is wrong. And that's not a guide that anybody can use for making a legal change to the land. Also, if you do get a survey, make sure that you put it on record with the state. I don't remember doing this. It's possible that the title company did it when we demanded the survey. It's possible the realtor did it. I honestly cannot remember who did it. I do know the title company is who sent me the survey. So they might have registered it with the city before they sent it to me. The survey technician might have registered it before it got sent in. I don't know. But at some point, our survey did get registered with the state. And when I went to planning and zoning once to discuss something, they asked if we had a survey. And I mentioned that we had gotten one. And he pulled it up and he said, "Oh, good, you registered it with us. If it's not recorded, it doesn't count." So make sure that if you do get a survey, you make sure you record it with the proper, I think it's the assessor's office, but I could be wrong. But make sure you record it because otherwise it's more of just a nice measurement somebody took for you, and it's not legally binding, at least not in New Mexico. So armed with all of that research and information, we finally decided to pull the trigger and buy 86 acres of desert in New Mexico. Desert and yucca. We have a lot of yucca. I also wanted to mention we purchased this land without mineral rights and water rights, and I'll explain why we were comfortable with that after the outro. It's just a little in-depth and weird, and so I wanted to cover the bulk of information now, and people who aren't interested in that can just stop watching. Hopefully that answers some of your land buying questions. I just sort of wanted to cover the things that we've been asked a lot, the things we went through, issues, and whatnot. The next video, I'll cover our most common question: what are you going to do with it? You have all this land, what's your plan? So if you're curious what that is going to look like, we'll discuss that next.